Right. So let's get into these questions and just, yeah, give people a feeling and a sense of things related to the retreat, related
Yeah,
to you as a teacher. So the first one we'll get into is what inspires you to teach the focus of the retreat?
yeah. It's a retreat I've been teaching since 2015,
Mhm.
and it really is my own, I would say, unique offering. And I've collaborated with a number of people, but it came out of my own practice. And the three main dimensions of the retreat are developing concentration, which we'll focus on especially the first 2 days. And
Mhm.
then the next 2 days will continue with concentration, but also bring in really dimensions of advanced insight practice around insight into impermanence, into dukkha, or sometimes translated as suffering or reactivity. And then thirdly, into what I call awakened awareness, a kind of non-dual awareness. And we'll cover that, especially the last 2 days. And while continuing with concentration and the insight practices the whole time, that'll be all supported by metta and also qigong. So in a way, I think of these as the jewels of the tradition, and the different dimensions of practice that really fill out a sense of practice, developing concentration and using that in order to have deeper insight, and then going to the deepest level of insight, which is this awakened awareness. The Buddha talked about it as signless, boundless, all luminous awareness, right? And it's also highlighted in the Thai forest tradition, talked about variously. Achan Mun talked about it as the radiant mind. Achan Cha, the teacher of Jack Cornfield and others, talked about it as the original mind. And so that's what we're looking into it. And in the Tibetan tradition, it's talked about as really sometimes talked about as the nature of the mind and heart. And so offering this retreat came out of my own practice. Uh, Starting about 15 years ago, I did several years really focusing on concentration. At the same time, I was also working with awakened awareness, which I had studied from both the Thai forest tradition and teachings of the Buddha, and then also the Tibetan tradition, particularly Dzogchen and Mahamudra. And I did a 1 month long Mahamudra retreat with Mingya Rinpoche in 2010. And after that, I developed really my own format. This was done at the meditation at the March retreat where I had, as I was mentioning, I've always been at Spirit Rock in March, either to teach the 1 month retreat there or to be a retreatant, which I've done one or the other every year but one since the year 2000. And from 2011 to 2015, I developed my own format of doing 9 days of concentration practice and then 5 days around insight practice to look at impermanence and look at dukkha or reactivity and look at not self. And I developed ways of practicing with those are not always taught. And then lastly, I had 2 weeks for awakened awareness. So I did that every year for 5 years. And also that became my daily practice. Those three aspects supported, I would, at the retreats, I would do metta during all the meals for the people, and then I would do qigong every morning as well. And so out of my own practice came the design for the retreat.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
that's really good. That's really rich, actually. That's a lot of good detail. I feel like that will give people a really tangible like sense of okay, this is what we'll be doing, this is what's happening.
Yeah, it's a beautiful mix. And as I said, it's sort of one builds on another, which is the way the teachings have been.
Mhm.
You know, we keep the concentration going for the entire retreat. When we bring in the insight practice, maybe we'll do every session would be one third or one half concentration. So you keep on developing the stability. And the beautiful thing about concentration, as is demonstrated in research by neuroscientists, is that concentration can be learned. You keep on doing it, the brain says, okay, I know what stability is. And you increasingly are able to develop more and more stable minds. So we keep that going, but then we add the other practices. Uh, and so we actually do the first one, concentration, pretty much the whole retreat. And then also when we start with the insight practice, we also keep that going some. And then we bring in the awakened awareness, maybe, one half to one third of the sessions of the last 2 days. We do it both in sitting meditation and in walking, and it's a beautiful mix, and we give it the flavor of metta. So there's kindness. Yeah, very nice.
Always, always, always. So thank you for that. Um, okay, and I would say, who is the retreat for?
Yeah, I would say it's for people who want to learn these jewels or treasures of the tradition, want to go into the deeper practices. Uh, it typically is better if people have some foundation in basic mindfulness practice. I think we have that as a recommendation, not a requirement, but a recommendation that people have a good foundation in a regular mindfulness practice. And so it could be for people who just want to go more deeply. Um, I think especially it would be for people who might be at intermediate or advanced places in their practice, because this is really after people have been practicing some, this gives a chance really to go more deeply. And I think especially for people who may have been practicing for a little while.
And how would you describe your teaching style?
Yeah, what's my teaching style? Interesting question. Um, Might be better to ask people who I teach, but but what's my own teaching style? I would say I like to connect with retreatants. And so I do tell personal stories. I want to really, when I give talks and instructions, I want to make it really practical and real and inspiring. I tell stories, and uh, also I think it can really be nice. I have been trained in a number of traditions, and particularly from the Insight tradition and Burmese and Thai traditions, but also Tibetan traditions. So particularly, so I can give some variety. I've learned probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 different modes of concentration. I will be pretty simple when I teach that, but when I meet with one-on-one with people, I have a sense of many options. Then a lot of the role of a teacher is to be skillful, and especially when I meet one-on-one, to say, okay, what works for you? What is a way to open up further here, or how do we work with that particular issue? So I love one-on-one work. I do a lot of work outside of retreats,
Mhm.
one-on-one with people. I love that, and I love just really hearing what's going for people. And I also value kind of longer term learning. So I like to give the option for a retreat like this of doing a follow up session, or maybe more than one, maybe several. So people can keep the learning going, not just at the retreat, but further. So
Mhm.
that's been very important to me, the sense of continuity and continuity also with daily life, and not, so I really For me, both personally and in my teaching, I like to really have a sense of an integrated practice where retreats are very special, but we also make connections between the retreats and daily life.
That's
Yeah,
a big
that's a
key.
big thing.
When you are in the room and you're leading retreat and you have at the ready all of these traditions and lineages that you've sat with in
Yeah.
terms of getting into the mind, do you choose beforehand or do you kind of feel things out in the moment to see which one is best to pull out?
Well, generally, when I teach in at Spirit Rock or in settings where we are really grounded in insight tradition, where that's the lineage, I pretty much stay within that lineage.
Mm.
And I might bring in stories or teachings that sort of complement it, but the center of gravity is the insight tradition. The same thing, awakened awareness is a little bit different. When I teach on that, I give some examples and teachings from Tibetan as well. But like for the main way of teaching is really grounded in the insight tradition. Although, yeah, again, I do bring in stories and perspectives, might give examples, but the basic methods are, again, the awakened awareness teachings a little bit different because there aren't very many in the insight tradition. Uh, but the other areas, the loving kindness, the concentration, the insight practices around impermanence and so forth, I mostly bring in from insight practice. Yeah, or certainly I don't bring in, you know, for those special Tibetan teachings particularly, and even it's not all that different for something like impermanence or concentration. So I actually do bring in some methods that I've learned which are helpful, like for concentration. I've learned some methods in the Tibetan tradition that really help with developing stability. Uh, yeah, so
And who or what inspired you to start teaching the Dharma?
yeah. Um, well, first of all, I think I knew myself as a teacher from a pretty young age. When I was in college as a junior, I was asked, along with a few other people, by my psychology teacher to join him in teaching Psychology 101 and offer our own once a week seminar. So I did that when I must have been 19 years old, right? Teaching at college, teaching a once a week seminar. And I knew myself as a teacher. I really enjoyed it. They thought I was a graduate student. I didn't probably look like a graduate student, but they thought that. So I kind of knew myself as a teacher, and it was sort of natural to start teaching. I started teaching meditation uh, probably 45 years ago. Yeah, and I was in my 20s, right? And my mentor at that time was Larry Rosenberg,
Mm.
who's a teacher in Cambridge. And I asked him, I said, you know, I'm a graduate student and I'm teaching a course. I was asked to teach a course on Asian philosophy. Can I teach meditation as part of that? He said, yeah, I think that's good. So he supported me in that. And I started, teaching in those contexts. And then later, again, with the support of mentors, I started a few years later teaching a weekly group, in the early 1980s, right? And I pretty much have taught since then, which is whatever that amount of time is. I guess that's over 40 years, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. And so I think I just wanted to teach because it was so meaningful to me. And after my first retreat, my first teacher on retreats was Joseph Goldstein. And also I met Jack Kornfield early on. Actually my brother uh, was a close friend of Jack Kornfield's brother, his younger brother. And we knew that Jack was sort of away at the time in Asia, but we grew up in the same place as Jack's family. They had moved, they had moved. This was in the Washington, D.C. area. Anyway, yeah, so I met Joseph Goldstein and Jack Kornfield early on. I met them at Naropa in Colorado and was inspired and just got really inspired to teach, and it was just very meaningful. It was also, um, I was a graduate student and then I taught for 7 years in universities. And the meditation teaching was actually almost like more connected with my heart and more expressive of who I was. And so I just felt drawn to it and had people mentor me along the way, and gradually started moving into teaching day-long retreats and weekend retreats, and and then later longer retreats. And um, yeah, and also before I was really interested in meditation and spirituality, I was more of an activist. My parents' ancestry is Jewish, but particularly my mom, sort of rebelled against religion as a kid. And they were more, particularly my mom was more into social justice issues. And they actually marched some with Dr. King in the civil rights movement, and I was kind of brought up with that, with social justice issues. And my father had been actually in World War II when he was young, and had stayed in the reserves in the Air Force, but he wore, when he went to reserve meetings in the late 60s, he would wear anti-war buttons, going on active reserve with the Air Force, with the Vietnam War. So that was kind of what I brought up. And over the years, it was always a question of how do I integrate the social change and social justice concerns with meditation and more inner work. And so for a lot of years, my primary home was Buddhist Peace Fellowship for about 15 years, maybe. I worked very closely and developed training programs for connecting inner and outer work. So that's part of my background also. It's part of the perspective I have. So it's not just meditation, not just retreat, but the long-term vision is integration with all the parts of our lives.
Yeah, very nice. And what is your focus for spiritual growth right now? Where are you looking to stretch and
Yeah,
expand?
my own personal focus.
Hmm.
Well, what first comes to mind really is this emphasis on daily life. In all of the practices I named, I find I can have a lot of stability on retreat, but how do I bring that same level of awareness into the flow of daily life, into, let's say, right now when I'm recording a video? How do, is my awareness now different from how it is on retreat? Right. So that's a big and challenging sort of learning edge, right? That how do I keep awareness on the computer? That's hard for most people, right? And so how do I avoid a separation between meditation and the rest of my life? That's an important learning edge, growing edge, something I teach a lot as well. We won't focus as much on that in the retreat, but maybe the last day and in any follow-up groups we do, that's a big emphasis. Yeah. So bringing all these practices into daily life, in meeting with people. One way that that's helped is I have over the years taught a lot on what we call wise speech, sometimes called mindful communication.
Mhm.
And I have been practicing on that for a long time. And I love teaching those retreats. That's a major way of integration as well, which I personally can do. It won't be taught very much, maybe a little bit at the end of the retreat, but personally, that's a big focus. And then, as you know, I'm going in 2 days to be on retreat for 4 weeks. And so, in addition to daily life, it's just keeping on deepening in my own practice, staying with retreats. Most of the last 35 years, I've also had a Sabbath practice where I take one day a week and practice most of the day. And that's really important too. Yeah.
Yeah, those are really big, especially that integration piece. It's a big thing for me in terms of walking in and finding stillness in each moment, not letting the mind overrun, not getting caught up in, like you're saying, you gave the computer as an example. I can still find ease, I can still find flow in that being really present in each message that I'm reading, whatever website I'm on, and really grounding in that moment. So, yeah, that is a big one.
It's a huge one for all of us. And, you know, um, I think one of the dangers of the way that meditation is developed in the West is that we have, I think, sometimes we don't emphasize daily life quite enough, I would say. A lot of emphasis on meditation and retreats are wonderful. I
Yeah.
probably have spent collectively maybe 8 or 9 years of my life on retreat. Yeah, a
Okay.
lot, right? So
Yeah, a significant amount.
daily life is really, really crucial.
It is. It is the practice.
And it's not easy.
Yeah, indeed.
And bringing it into relationships. Another area I teach on is how to work with differences and conflicts.
Mm,
So I'm actually teaching a retreat on that in June in North Carolina. Yeah,
okay, okay.
it's a neat topic. Yeah,
Yeah, that'll be a good one too.
powerful. Yeah,
Yeah, well, thank you for answering these questions. You've given me a lot of rich details and
yeah,
rich story from where you started and where you are and intention and all that. So yeah,
yeah.
thank you.